Hello everyone, RotS review here with a look at the Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, Annakin Skywalker. Now I actually have some fundamental issues with this that I'll discuss at the end of the video, but until then let's take a closer look at this figure. You know, I've complained about this before and I'm gonna say it again. I just dislike the fact that we get this really neat looking packaging, but then in the process you really have to destroy it. You know, first when you get the figure out, it kind of rips, and then if you actually want to redeem the offer, you have to rip off the UPC, but, you know, you don't actually need to cut it out. Some people can actually just tear it off. I've actually seen it torn off a few times at stores. I mean, obviously not in front of me, but the packaging there has the UPC torn. I don't know what I'd actually do if I saw somebody tearing it. Probably yell at them. Maybe not, I don't know. I'm not a very confrontational kind of person. But yeah, here's Anakin Skywalker in all of his Anakin gloriness. If that makes any sense. Technically speaking, this is really the Darth Vader, although pre-burns / machinery required to keep him alive. You know, he looks pretty decent. The only problem I really have, which I kind of noticed in pack, is just the fact that the hair looks a little bit separated from the head, like they chose to glue the piece on after the fact, and, you know, it kind of supports the idea of the fact that it looks like there's a separate portion here sort of painted on. So, I'm not sure what's up with that. However, I will say that it doesn't look as bad in this one as some of the other ones I saw in stores. The other really big thing is the fact that he has this whole robe going on. You know, it's actually a half-decent robe. I mean, sometimes you get some really cheap fabric, but it looks like it has some additional parts like sewn on here, like the cowl part's actually separate. And oh yeah, the fact that there is a cowl part in the first place where you can actually pull it up. In general, I'm not a huge fan of cloth elements with my figures, and even in this case, I'm really not terribly fond of it, just because it doesn't look as nice in terms of detail as, like, say, getting a plastic one, but you have to appreciate the additional posability something like this offers. All the same, let's quickly try taking this off. Actually, hold on a second. I really have nothing against the cloak, I just felt that it'd be more beneficial if you saw the actual joints and more detail of the figure. And, you know, there is an impressive amount of detail with all the clothing and stuff, and, you know, that's what I really like to see rather than just a cheap layer of cloth tossed over it. You'll notice there's a good amount of texture with little notches here, in addition to, like, folds and everything, and he's got his little pouches all around. Also, this figure has a fair amount of articulation. I mean, that's one of the things I do like about the vintage line, because a lot of the figures you were getting in, like, the Saga Legends were kind of gimped in terms of articulation. Even, like, one of the more recent Anakins, which I think was a repack of an older one, had, like, a split elbow as opposed to either a hinge or ball joint in this case, or ball and socket, if you will. You know, that's the sort of articulation I really like to see. Also, no. Sorry, I thought it was like the Luke where you have a little ball joint here to move the hand up and down, but no such luck. Otherwise, you know, really no issues there. Quick run through of articulation. We have a rotating wrist, a ball and socket here at the elbow. You know, really good range of motion. It's one of the better examples of it. A ball jointed shoulder. Nothing really impedes it, although when you're trying to get the overhead, I guess it kind of doesn't go as far as you might like. Just if you wanted to have, like, him kind of doing a double-handed slash, which, I mean, is disappointing, because I believe he did that trick a few times in the fight against Obi-Wan. Now, the head is on a physical ball, but the hair goes so far back it greatly impedes him while looking up. You can look down a little bit, but again, you know, the sculpt kind of impedes that. Waist rotation, there's no ab/diaphragm. Then at the leg, we have a ball joint. Upskirt shot. But yeah, it's just like the Luke that I previously reviewed, and, like they did with some of the Clone Wars stuff. Then at the knee we have another ball and socket like the elbow. Again, decent range of motion. Now, I mean, although I don't necessarily like ball and sockets for some joints, like especially when for flesh ones, it works okay when you're doing stuff when it's under like levels of clothing or layers of clothing. And then at the foot we have another ball and socket. Goes a great deal that way, but doesn't really go too far up in the front, but they almost never do. You will notice that the whole joint does line up for that, and then it rotates, because that's what ball sockets do. So yes, I definitely love this range of motion. It's a very solid figure in terms of that. It comes with two accessories. One is the lightsaber with the blade out. Other lightsaber blade in. Basically the same thing we got with the Luke from the Return of the Jedi. Now, I don't see a place where you can actually peg it in. Oh, here it is. So, I mean, if you wanted, you could peg in the lit or unlit lightsaber, or activated or deactivated. I'm just plugging the lit one, which you never would do because you actually need to have your finger on the button to keep the thing going. Just because I don't feel like taking the unactivated one out yet, but, that's what it would kind of look like if there wasn't a blade here. His shorts is bigger than yours. Yes, Spaceballs reference. I've truly sunk to a new low. All in all, I do like this figure, and hold on for a second and I'll get to the actual rant portion. Otherwise, have a nice day. Alright, and now on to my gripe. Now, I don't feel that the prequel trilogy really belongs in the vintage series, although I can understand why they did it, and I will go into that right after this. First off, it's just the whole definition of vintage that just doesn't seem to work out, because vintage means old. The prequel trilogy came out under 10 years ago, so it doesn't get close to qualifying. But the bigger gripe I have is the fact this isn't even the same original packaging that these figures came with. I mean, basically it's supposed to be like upgraded figures in the old style packaging, but on the back, this is his original packaging. It's a bubble package. It's got whole different design to it. I mean, basically what they did was they tossed it in the aesthetic of the really old stuff, and it just seems like a betrayal of the whole concept here, but that's what vintage means to them, just doing it in the old style package, which is kind of crap, but it does at the same time fit the general aesthetic that they used to use, where you take a scene from the movie, and then you have the figure next to it, and it even has the old Kenner logo here and the mail-in Boba Fett offer, which I still need to do, which is on all the figures. But I just feel it's really off having prequel trilogy characters and your prequel waves as vintage, or being labeled as vintage series. I mean, just call it something else maybe. I mean, the one exception obviously is the Darth Sidious, because that's Emperor Palpatine, and he was released, I believe, in the Empire Strikes Back line, and or if not, the Return of the Jedi in the vintage series. But that's just me. Let me know what you think, if you agree with the concept of this is vintage, or if you disagree, whatever. But until next time, folks.